Hello everybody, and welcome back to Insider's Guide. Today we're revisiting one of the older Insider's Guides I've made, episode 7 about Arapahoe Basin. It's been well over 2 years now, and I want to finally go run by run on all of the extreme zones, along with adding just a bit of other information here and there. Obviously, if you haven't watched parts A and B, you need to watch those before this, as this video is solely filling in the gaps in those ones. So with that, let's begin part C of an Insider's Guide to Ski Resorts, Arapahoe Basin. To start off, I'd like to mention how if you want to reach Davis from Pollavicini, it does require a bit of traversing. This little blue ridge run splits, and you'll want to stick to your right to try and avoid having to sidestep up. Davis begins with a traverse before dropping off into a super steep and icy blue that is more often ungroomed than groomed. The sign at the entrance to the catwalk will tell you if it is groomed or not, however. The other blue in the Beavers, Loafer, also starts off with a catwalk, but it is much more exposed and as such gets windy and icy. After one particularly icy section, it then turns into a much nicer blue, but the final pitch into the Beavers' bottom lift terminal is quite steep, so don't be fooled. Some of the best tree skiing in Colorado can be found within Arapahoe Basin's Beavers section, but even within the Beavers, there are some places that are better than others. The trees between Davis and Loafer here are known as the Dogwoods, as Digger, Alex, Yeager, and Jetta were the names of Arapahoe Basin's original avalanche dogs. These runs are the most popular and as such get skied off the quickest. They are, however, some of the steepest. Porcupine, Bailey Brothers, and Faculty Club all typically don't have great snow, and because everything on this side flows into Face Shot Gully, it also gets pretty skied off. My favorite spot, by far, tending to have the best snow, is over here on the looker's right of Loafer. These aren't as steep as others in the zone, but are a super playful area. There is a solid traverse to get out, but it moves pretty quickly and is plenty doable for snowboarders. There are lots of gates and access points along the length of Loafer to get into the woods. Alright, so I pretty much wholly neglected the extreme terrain in the first two parts, which is absolutely criminal because it's what Arapahoe Basin does best. So I think it's long overdue for us to now finally go run by run. My one thing I will say before we do that, however, is that I'm only going to go over the lines shown on the trail map here, with a few exceptions. There are dozens and dozens of lines on the east wall, but most are in these closed areas or aren't labeled for a reason. If you're a true diehard and want to hit some of the more hidden lines, we can talk more personally, but I don't want to start talking about hidden couloirs and other hike to spines just publicly on the internet and cause people who shouldn't be on those to go there. Anyways, let's begin with the east wall. There are 3 sections of the east wall. The highest up is the North Pole area. This is also, I believe, the most popular of the 3 sections, so these chutes get skied off the fastest. The hike gets extremely windy on most days, so just be prepared for that. Pretty much comes with the territory of climbing to the top of a Colorado mountain. At the top of the 15 to 20 minute hike, you can put your skis on, or what I would recommend is continue carrying them as you traverse along the ridge. If you're going all the way to North Pole or just a second notch, you'll definitely want to keep them off. If you're heading more in the direction of first notch or narrow North Pole, then you can probably put your skis on, but I still wouldn't recommend it. Not very far from the summit is First Notch. First Notch is a relatively narrow chute where you can pretty much only do jump turns. Down towards the bottom, it gets even narrower, and in lower snow conditions, if it's open, can require a short section of straight line. Second Notch is the next signed opening you'll come across. In this one, you'll need to down climb using a rope before putting your skis on in the neck of the chute. From there, you can side slip, or, if the snow base is high enough, hit a few jump turns to get down to where it widens out. Second Notch often has the best snow of the North Pole section because of that daunting access requirement. Next up is Narrow North Pole. Narrow North Pole starts off with a solid cornice most times before bottlenecking about 20 yards down. You can straight line that little section and then you're out in the open. Just past Narrow North Pole, you'll have to sidestep or hike just a minute or two more to access North Pole proper. I would argue that this is the second easiest line on the east wall. It's shielded in the corner, so it typically has a solid snow base, although it also seems to be the most popular run and thus gets skied off pretty quickly. This may also just be me being picky, but it seems like the proportion of people skiing way above their ability level is much higher on North Pole, which leads to lots of people side-slipping and scraping off the snow, exposing rocks and other obstacles. This chute, however, does stay relatively wide the entire way and has plenty of room to turn. Next, let's head down to the East Wall Traverse. This is a single-track traverse that is relatively difficult to reach from Lenawee Face. I would definitely recommend heading to it from Humbug. Get some solid speed entering the traverse and you'll get along it just fine. It is a single track the whole way, and you can drop off skiers left at any point. Land of the Giants has some large rock features here and there, but they can be easily avoided. Those features, however, can be nice to work your way up to the east wall proper. This middle hike is referred to as the Willie's Wide Staircase. It is a workout, especially at that elevation. If you've never done anything like it, take it easy and don't be afraid to take breaks. Underneath this big rock here, about 2/3 of the way up, is an optimal spot, as it's nice and flat and shielded. I would highly recommend a ski backpack for the staircase, however, whereas the North Pole hike is much easier with your skis over your shoulder. You can always drop off the staircase and put your skis on to ski down Willie's Wide, which I consider to be the easiest line on the east wall. If you go all the way to the top of the staircase, the uppermost section is a bit rocky, but below that it feels more like a bowl than an extreme. Of course, a lot of people just plain ignore Willie's Wide, which is honestly valid because it really doesn't seem worth it to hike all the way up for a wide open face, especially when there are really good chutes next door. However, this leads to Willie's Wide being untouched a lot longer than other east wall lines, so just keep that in consideration. The snorkel here is a wide chute with plenty of room to turn. To get to it, however, you'll be traversing and starting down through an area with lots of rock bands. If you keep traversing over, you'll get the corner chute, a very similar run, although I would argue that corner chute is even wider. Further down the east wall traverse, at an area that is even more rarely open than the other two east wall zones, there is another staircase that takes you to the Y chutes and the tree chutes. The Y chutes are relatively similar to North Pole and corner chute. The tree chutes require a traverse in, but because they are so remote and hard to find, they are a great place to find some powder. They are numbered 1 through 8, with 8 being immediately lookers left of the staircase and proceeding down in number lookers left from there. The tree chutes themselves aren't terribly difficult, but they do have lots of obstacles just here and there on the ground to watch out for. The trees do get denser as you get further into the tree chutes towards the lower numbered chutes, but the runs also start getting shorter. Beware that the Y and tree chutes will put you out well below Lenawee, so they are much more intensive to lap than the other two east wall sections. Alright, now let's jump over towards Pallavicini. 13 cornices, I'm not even sure why that's rated extreme. My chute is a touch narrow, but it's a far cry from the east wall chutes. International is a super wide mogul run, one of the easier extreme lines you'll find at the Legend. Northglade and Bear Trap fit the same bill. East Avenue, Timberglades, Turbo, and Rock Garden are all pretty much tree skiing, although they do have bouts of moguls and or rocks. Roller Coaster is the Poly lift line with huge moguls and usually terrible snow. West Turbo, I would say, is the hardest run in the Poly zone. West Turbo has a couple of different chute options, but almost all of them are mandatory straight lines. They're not too long, but after having a bit of space to turn out and stop at the bottom, they all then funnel into one more super tight chute. I'd almost argue that West Turbo is harder than any of the runs we just talked about on the east wall. Pali Cornice, as you can probably guess, typically offers a large drop into Pali Main Street and this area ambiguously labeled just Pallavicini. Pali Main Street, similarly to International, is a super wide mogul run. However, unlike International, Main Street has a section in the middle, about halfway down, that is riddled with saplings and offers a nice little cliff at the end. This forces you into somewhat of a mogul chute on either side. I prefer the skier's right side, but it doesn't make much difference. Going right down the spine in the middle will have the best snow, but it is by far the most technical of the 3 routes. The spine and Pali face often have some of the best snow on the mountain due to the way the wind buffs the snow there. I love that area and could lap it all day. Those areas don't have the Cornice drop-in, but they do still have the moguls. David's Run is pretty much just trees. Second Alley is a super narrow bumped out cut through the trees. Third and fourth alley are longer, but are similar to Second Alley. Gauthier is very tight, with pretty much only room for jump turns or side slipping. At the bottom, it opens up into a rocky face. What makes Upper Gauthier even more intimidating is the fact that there are a handful of trees in the middle of the run, which makes those turns even more difficult. It is easy to miss, so be sure to keep your eyes peeled as you go down 4th Alley. Pollywog is a traverse with lots of fun little side hits and whatnot. Honestly, Christmas trees and janitors only are only viable, at least in my book, as last-ditch efforts to find powder. I don't find them worth it due to the hike out they require. And then we have the steep gullies. The steep gullies are aptly named, and they're well painted on this map too. They start off super rocky, and while most have room to turn, you'll have to keep your eyes peeled extremely well. These I do find worth the 20-minute hike out. Rather than what is shown on the trail map, there are actually 8 steep gullies, and 4 through 8 are accessed by heading down the ridgeline to this second gate. 6 through 8 are interesting because they're not quite as rocky as the others, but rather feature trees as their main obstacle. In all honesty, the steep gullies are an area better explored than described. That's also me partially covering myself because I haven't skied them enough to know them super well, and I'm willing to admit that. That's also a testament to how rarely the steep gullies are open, as they take a huge amount of snow to be filled in substantially. Definitely don't take your super nice skis to the steep gullies, however, as you will hit a rock at some point or another in all likelihood. Thankfully, the hike out is relatively level, at least in comparison to the staircases on the east wall. I don't find the cellar worth it for the hike all the way back to Polly, but Bald Spot is a fun little extra tree skiing area as long as you don't miss the hike back up to the Beavers. Over in the Zuma Bowl, you can traverse along the Zuma Cornice. Take a wild guess at what the defining feature here is. This section before the middle gate is known as MGD. After a big cornice drop-in, you'll find a rocky, albeit open area. This area gets skied off pretty quickly, as it can be traversed to. To get up to this gate and beyond, however, you will have to sidestep up a bit, which keeps more people away. As such, I'd much prefer Schofler Jump and End Zone over MGD. This Zuma hike-back stuff I honestly don't find worth it either. I would recommend, if you head down Zuma Cornice, to just take Jump, avoid the rocks at the top, enjoy some soft turns, and then hit Zuma for another lap without having to take your skis off. Alright, that was a lot of information. There's a lot more I could say, but I'm trying to keep this relatively concise so y'all will actually watch it. As always, please leave any questions down below. Go check out another episode of Insider's Guide, perhaps another recently amended episode, such as Copper Mountain. I apologize for it taking this long to finally cover the legendary A-Basin extremes, but I thank you all for watching. All my love, I'm out.